Jason Bloom, president of the PA State Corrections Officers Association. Tell us about your members and what they do.
Well, we have approximately 10,600 corrections officers, maintenance officers, and food service instructors, along with community corrections officers. Our job is basically to keep the prisons not full, but keep the people that are in the prisons in prison. That's our job: care, custody, and control. Keep them away from the society that they have proven that they can't be a productive member of.
And how many state prisons do we have here in Pennsylvania?
Well, we have 25 prisons, then we have community corrections centers, and we have 2 state hospitals.
And what about the budget here in Pennsylvania? A lot of it goes to corrections, right?
Yes, a lot of the budget goes to corrections. It takes a lot of money to keep all these individuals incarcerated.
Mm-hmm. And where is most of the money spent, can you say?
I'm not really sure. They do a lot of programs, they do a lot of things, but also the overhead is staff to run them. Mm-hmm. It's not a cheap thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that job and try to put us into the shoes of a typical corrections officer and what that person goes through in a day.
Well, we typically do 8-hour shifts. It's nothing like in the movies.
You come in and you do what? Try to take it through a step.
Well, you come in, if you come in on a 6 to 2 shift, you're going to come in, you're going to count the inmates, make sure that we haven't lost anybody or anybody's gotten out. We're going to call for chow, we're going to call for activities, we're going to do mainline, we're going to run yard.
Did you say mainline?
Mainline.
So what is that?
Mainline is just, we're going to have people that are going, inmates that are out for calls, go to medical, go to school, go to those types of things inside of the institution. Then you're going to count at noon, make sure we still have everybody in, start it all over after count, go back to afternoon schools, afternoon call-outs, those types of things. At 2 o'clock, we would do a shift change, inform the officers that are coming on what has happened during the course of the day, let them know what's happening, and then we will go home, and 2 to 10, we'll take over from there. And typically at 4 o'clock, any inmates that work will come in, they'll be counted at 4, then we'll do chow, and then do the evening recreation.
Mm-hmm. And given the prison population, tell us about the occupational hazards of a job like this.
Well, the occupational hazards are, we know, anything from you could get hit, kicked, spit on, up to and including Sergeant Mark Bazerman last year at Somerset, his life was taken.
And how regularly is there trouble like we just talked about?
Fortunately, nothing to the extent of Sergeant Bazerman, but on a day-to-day incident right now as we're talking, in the half hour that this show will be, we'll have an officer somewhere along the line, something will happen to them.
Oh, so generally there is some kind of disruption somewhere in the system.
Yes.
And tell us more about that officer. You just invoked his name a minute ago. What happened to him? Who is he and what happened to him?
Sergeant Mark Bazerman was murdered last year at SCI Somerset. He was...
What were the circumstances?
He was knocked to the ground and kicked in the head several times, and then later lost his life about, I think, 12 days after the incident.
Was there an investigation into that incident, and was there any kind of systemic problem identified?
One of the problems that I see, this inmate was told to take a towel down, which was simply, he was blocking the view of corrections officers. You couldn't see into his cell. He was told to take it down. He didn't like that. He came back, he took it out on the sergeant. And in the perfect world, I would say that inmate should have been written up. He should have been taken to the restricted housing unit, and we would have had more control over him. But the Department of Corrections, in their infinite wisdom, at times have said that the RHU, if they can hold 130 inmates, when you get inmate number 131, they decide to release one. That's not my philosophy of safety inside an institution. I believe any jail cell that can be locked can be a restricted housing unit cell. Just because we don't have that room in that specific cell block, I don't believe that you give them a free pass.
So about how many inmates are supervised by any prison guard at any time? In other words, I'm trying to get an idea of their workload and how much responsibility each individual has.
Typically, the newer style prisons, you're going to have one on each wing, a rover, and then possibly somebody in a control center. But they don't normally use those control centers now.
Newer style prison?
The newer style.
And what makes them new? Are they any better than the old?
I come from an old jail, so I'm kind of partial. The new jails, they're more set up like a college campus. I came from SCI Huntington. I worked on a block. I had 396 inmates to 4 staff.
So the workload, does it vary much from prison to prison? I mean, prisons being different sizes, of course.
No, I don't believe so. Our job is care, custody, and control of inmates. It's particularly the same thing in each institution. You have your good inmates, you have your bad inmates. You have those ones. You have your problems at every jail. A prison is like a town, and we have everything that a normal town has, including a jail, an RHU, a restricted housing unit from, the jail within a jail, so to speak. And those things, we run it, like I said earlier, you have all your activities, you do those things, and when inmates act up, that's where you take them. You take them to the RHU. What
kind of training does a corrections officer get? Why not tell us about what kind of training you got personally?
Well, I went to the training academy. I had, I believe, 6 weeks of training, medical, first aid, CPR, handgun and shotgun training, interpersonal communications, how to speak with them, how to get your point across, those types of things. And it's all well and good at the academy, but it's the on-the-job training, so to speak, that you get, that it's not a perfect world in a classroom. It doesn't correlate over, I would say. When you're in a prison, they don't all say yes sir, no sir, and do what you ask them to do or tell them to do. So
why not tell us about your first day on the job and how you might contrast what you got in the classroom to what you actually experienced in the prison?
It's extremely different. The classroom is a controlled environment. You would like to think that, like in the movies, they're all locked up, they're all in. That is not the case. That is not the case at all. They're out, they're walking around. I like to say you're amongst them. So when you and I are talking, having a conversation, you may have 4 or 5 of their buddies standing around on the sideline waiting to see how you handle yourself, how you talk to the inmate. And your first day on the job, you have all the officers watching you too. They want to make sure that you know what you're doing and you can handle yourself.
Now let's talk about some issues that have been dealt with the corrections officers. Recently there was a situation involving the staff was getting sick from the incoming mail at the prisons. Now tell us what that was about.
The exposures, what was happening, the mail was coming in and it was a liquid K2 version thing. People were getting exposed, getting sick.
What were the first symptoms they exhibited that showed you that there might be something wrong?
Some were dizzy, extremely hot, felt ill. Some even said, I don't know if I've never been high, but this is is this what this feels like? Things, and they were just ill all around. The Department of Corrections.
How many prisons had that problem?
It's hard to tell on how the Department of Corrections really reported it. I'm not going to say there were 15. I'm not going to say that there was 3.
Well, put it this way, about how many cases were reported before you knew something had to be investigated here? This is even before you figured out that there might be contraband involved.
I'm going to say there was probably 7 or 8 cases that we heard of through our membership and said, what's going on? We made some calls to the Department of Corrections and said, okay, what are we doing? And then
they eventually did decide to do something, and it was change the policy.
Yeah, they changed the policy. They sent all the mail to Florida to be copied and then sent back in. They placed body scanners in the institutions. They removed the food products from the visiting room, those types of things. And it's been very good to this point. But like I said, they've given us body scanners. They gave us a high-tech piece of equipment, but they're not giving us, in some instances, they're not giving us the body to run it. So you're giving this other corrections officer, they're going to do the strip searches, they're going to process inmates in and out, they're going to do the body scanner, they're going to do any other types of things. This is the last line of defense to keep drugs out. I think this is the one thing that we need to take absolutely seriously to keep our institutions as drug-free as possible.
Now, I understand this drug, K2, is a synthetic marijuana. I'd never heard of it before. I wonder why that particular drug was favored to be smuggled via the U.S. mail system.
I really couldn't tell you. I honestly don't know. I know that the liquid K2, the last thing I heard from the security officers, but they were actually putting it in inkjets and printing out a letter or a picture and sending it in. There you go.
Oh, well, that's pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, yes.
Now, I heard that even drawings, apparently done by a child, but they weren't, done in crayon, contain this drug. There were just all kinds of ways to get this drug.
Yeah, there's all ways to get it in, and I think the best and safest thing is reproduce the mail, send it in.
Now, tell me more about the policy of having the mail, now non-legal mail, is going to a facility in Florida. I wonder how they were chosen, and that's 1,000 miles away. It seems like it might be an inefficient way to do things.
I honestly don't know how the Department of Corrections came to that company to do that. One thing that I'd like to see in the future is, instead of copying it and giving it to the inmate, I think we're in the 21st century. I believe that we could possibly scan it and send it to their tablets or their email address, or however that goes, and that would lessen the contraband or the paper product that's even inside an institution.
Now, what becomes of the originals that are in Florida that are never forwarded to the inmates? What do you do with them?
I'm not sure what they do.
And
I'm truly not sure.
presumably some of them could have this drug K2 mixed in, and that's the whole point the procedure took place in the first place.
Correct.
Well, I understand that some families are unhappy about this policy, and some of them have quit sending mail to inmates. And what do you say to them on behalf of your organization?
I would say I'm sorry about that, but ultimately my main concern is the security and the safety of my members. So an inconvenience, okay, sorry, but I want my membership to be safe.
Now, the important distinction here is that the general mail goes to Florida, but letters that originate from lawyers, legal mail, that comes straight to the institution, doesn't it?
Yes, it comes straight to the institution, is opened up in front of the inmate,
right,
and searched and gone through from there.
Now, the ACLU has all kinds of concerns about unintended parties reading this mail. And so what might be worked out in the future as far as the ACLU is concerned?
Sometimes I'm not sure what the ACLU themselves want. That would be something that they would absolutely have to go through with the Department of Corrections. But legal mail, there's so much of it you couldn't read it all, and you're doing it right in front of the inmate. Yeah.
Would you say that's most of the mail that comes into inmates, legal in nature?
No. No. There's
mostly personal stuff?
Yeah, mostly personal.
Now, also, I understand as an extension of this policy that there's talk of banning books, because usually book donations had been welcome in the past, but I understand you can take the page in a book and soak it with K2, and there's your drug, and it's the contraband.
Correct.
It gets in the institution. So what kind of changes are taking place there?
Right now, the Department of Corrections has, I believe, 2 teams that are going through books at a central location, going through them, and then sending them from there.
And also there are e-books as an option.
Correct.
And some of these, I understand, they're expensive, even when they're public domain titles. It's costing inmates more to just read stuff in prison.
Apparently so, yes.
And as far as other changes are concerned, I think you alluded to one a minute ago, and it has to do with an ion scanner. Is that the thing you were talking about a few minutes ago? It's supposed to detect
the body
trace
scanner.
amounts.
We have an ion scanner. But
what's the difference?
Well, the ion scan, they'll rub on your hands, your pockets, they'll put it through, they'll put it in the machine, and it'll come up if you've been in contact with any type of drugs. The body scanner is basically when you go into the airport and you put your hands up and it goes around, it gives you a full shot of your body. It can tell you if you have something foreign on your person or in your person.
Now, I understand that you want special radios that can alert other officers when an officer is down. Tell me about that.
Well, we want man-down radios that simply, they have a button. You're in trouble, you can hit that call button, and help will come.
Now, I understand there was an incident in the last year or so that involved a guard who had been stabbed, but nobody knew it for 10 minutes.
Corrections officer. We don't call ourselves guards. I'm sorry. I
Understood.
take it. It's a profession. We do a job that nobody wants to do. We do it well, and I believe that it's a profession. Sorry, but that's just
I understand.
where we're
Yeah,
at.
your organization feels strongly about that.
Yes.
About the
Yes.
nomenclature.
Yes, we do. That's something that we take very seriously. Just that's where we're at.
Let's talk about Representative Carl Metzger. He's working on things that would concern your membership, and one has to do with a clearer definition of assault. So first, tell me, what is the threshold for assault right now? What could constitute an assault in real terms?
Well, an assault right now through the Department of Corrections is if an inmate would physically touch you. Representative Metzger wants to lower that threshold to spitting, tossing of fluids, of feces, those types of things. Lower the threshold because that's something that happens on a too regular basis, and the inmate then gets away with it.
Yeah. Now, let me understand what you said a minute ago about the current threshold for assault is simply an inmate touching a corrections officer. Is that what I heard?
Well, kicking or striking.
Okay, that's
not
different.
just touching.
That's different. Okay.
Correct.
So these other incidents, these other awful things you described a second ago, that's going to be included in his
Yes.
legislation?
Yes,
So
it
that
is.
happens fairly regularly, huh? And needs to be addressed?
Needs to be addressed. Absolutely.
And how about, I understand that whenever there's trouble like this, do you want to involve entities outside the prison, like the district attorney or the state police?
Well, absolutely. We would like to see if an inmate.
Right now it's kept under your roof, isn't it?
Yes, it's kept under the roof, and I believe that we need if you're going to protect us and we're going to do this job. If an inmate spits, kicks, punches, throws, whatever, they need to be charged. We're not punching bags. It's not CO Everlast. It's CO Bloom. It's CO Smith. It's CO correction officer, whoever. I don't believe that we go in there to be a punching bag for anybody, and we should be. The DOC should hold those inmates accountable.
And I understand there would be an effect on parole eligibility under the
Yes,
new definition of assault?
I believe in one of Carl Metzger's bills.
So if you're
it will-
convicted of assault, what would happen if you're an inmate?
Well,
Your
if-
eligibility would be yanked altogether?
yes, if you're convicted of assault on a corrections officer, yes.
So typically how are prisoners dealt with who break the rules now? How does it usually shake out in the end?
Well, it's the corrections officer will write the infraction, they'll write a misconduct, it'll go to the hearing examiner, and that's pretty much where the inmate will come in, tell his side of the story,
Okay.
and the hearing examiner will either say guilty or not guilty, and that's where there's a big breakdown. There's a big breakdown in the system right there. Hearing examiners are, a lot of times, they make their own decisions, they go out on their own, and they're letting a lot of these things slide that I don't think should be. I think they should be held accountable also when they say that they find an inmate not guilty of an assault or any other type of infraction.
And if somebody is found guilty, what typically are the consequences that are meted out?
Well, they could do between 1 and 90 days in the RHU.
RHU, what is that?
Restricted Housing Unit, the jail within the jail.
So what's different about the RHU and the rest of the facility?
In the RHU, your movement's restricted. You're in your cell 23 hours a day. Your meals are brought to you. You can go to the
So it
yard.
sounds like a lot of isolation.
Yes, yes, away from the general population.
Now, something else that Representative Metzger is working on has to do with magazine capacity for rifles. Now, what kind of changes are being embraced there?
Oh, I think it's a good. I think it's a good thing.
What does he want to do, Metzger?
Well, Metzger wants to put a minimum of, I believe the bill says a minimum of 500 rounds for a auto-loading rifle.
How many do you have now?
In the towers.
Okay, in the towers, right.
In the towers to overlook the yard activities. If something bad would happen there, you have the ammunition to protect the staff that are there and to quell whatever happens.
So have there been incidents where a corrections officer has run out of ammo and said, boy, we should really have a bigger capacity for these magazines?
No, No, we haven't run
I'm
out.
just wondering,
No,
often
we haven't.
it's a
but
situation that inspires a change.
Correct. No, there's no situation for this. I believe it's, let's make sure we don't have that situation where we do run out and need to reevaluate after the fact. I think Carl's being very proactive in this approach.
One more thing Metzger is working on has to do with banning boots on inmates. Now, I understand that they can be weaponized, these boots, and how regular an occurrence is that in prison?
Well, after Sergeant Bazerman was murdered, we told them we wanted the Timberland boots, the big heavy-soled lug boots, out of the institution after he was kicked in the head. And the department did that. However, the department issues a work boot with a hard sole on it. I don't understand why they do that. That would be a cost that they don't need to incur. If they wanted to give them boots, then they could treat them like any other work item. You go to work, you get your boots, you do your work. At the end of the day, when you go back to your cell, you put your sneakers on. I don't believe that they need to have boots inside an institution. I would like to see all boots removed.
Let's talk about Representative Pam Snyder. She's working on a bill, House Bill 45, and it has to do, the bill reads stun guns. Now, is a stun gun the same as a taser? Now, I ask because the language here, like nomenclature we were talking about before, may be very important here.
Well, the tasers, the bill is put a taser on your hip and be able to pull it and electrify
Now, a taser is a thing that throws something out.
Yes, I believe that's what she's looking for. So, and that's something that, not that we don't want to use that every day, but you don't want to. Pam has gotten us pepper spray last year, and that is a very good tool that we have. That we don't dive into an altercation with two inmates with weapons. We can stand off, spray them, let the chemicals take effect. I believe this is just something else that's getting us into the 21st century that will protect the members from undue harm.
So you believe it's necessary to escalate from pepper spray to the stun gun or taser?
Yeah, I believe you do. It's one of those things that we want to be safe in what we're doing. And I think that is the next step as far as, instead of us diving in and rolling around and one of us getting stabbed.
Now, one more bill she's working on has to do with increasing staffing, which I'm sure just in general appeals to your members, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. What she wants is, I believe in the bill, it says that no corrections officer will work around inmates alone, no more with just a single staff member. And that's a good thing. There's always power in numbers, and it always will give an inmate pause that you're not alone. So absolutely, that's something that I would love to see.
So do you suppose it's feasible? Because that sounds like the complement of staff would have to be increased dramatically in order to get another person in the room. Just to go from 1 to 2 people.
Yes, I believe there would be a cost and there would be an increase, obviously. But again, we're talking about safety. And it's one of those things that you want to be able to quell a situation as quick as you can, because you never know when that could spill over into something else and more inmates getting involved. You don't want that to happen. You want to get whatever problem arises, you want to get that under control as best as possible.
Anything else you're working on that would address the safety of your officers?
Well, we're working hand in hand with the legislature to get these things done, and it's a very good start to do these things, and we welcome all the help we can get in accomplishing these tasks.
How soon might they be taken up? Any idea?
I have
in
no
our
idea.
busy legislature.
Yes, I have no idea, but I knock on the door of those individuals rather often to see where we're at, and let's get them moving.
We have just a few minutes left, Jason, so let's talk about something called the Bobby Wilt Foundation. Who's Bobby Wilt, and who does it benefit?
Well, Bobby Wilt was a very good friend of mine that lost his life in an accident years ago, and Bobby will give you the shirt off his back. So what we did in around 2010, we started this foundation, and it is designed to help our members in any catastrophic type event in their life: illness, car accident, house fire, those types of things. It's something that we want to be able to take care of our own and let them know that they're not alone, and that we support them financially and in any other way that we can to make sure that to get well. to get well.
So how busy is the foundation? How often is it called on to provide help?
I would say 3 or 4 times a month. And
That often?
I would
I'm
say
surprised to hear that.
on an average, and I'm glad when it is called upon. But I absolutely love it when there's months that we don't have anything going on, because that means everything's going good in everyone's lives of my members. So.
We've been talking with Jason Bloom, president of the PA State Corrections Officers Association. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.